explain to them at the beginning of every chat why I'm doing this?
Yeah. I mean, we're going way further than we need to. I feel like with the guests, you take maybe 2 seconds.
And then I'm like, all right, to the business. But, it's a holiday today.
All praise Dankiel.
All praise Dankiel. This is living in authenticity, and that's what we're all about here. So I took today off from work as a mental health holiday. You did not, so you're still working. But
nope.
Having conversations is not work to me. I like being just in the flow with you and enjoying life. We've got fabulous lemonade made, and we're gonna have tacos tonight.
It's gonna be great.
It's gonna be great. So obviously that will be cut out of the edited version of the podcast.
That's good to know.
Since it is probably not going to be relevant if you are listening anytime other than live. But who knows? I don't know. Maybe we'll just leave it as is. Authenticity.
In case you're listening to this later, we recorded this on 4/20.
On 4/20.
Yep.
So I wanted to do a live today because today is a solar eclipse, a very rare hybrid, and there's so much energy just flowing around. And I feel like there's so many more people than ever before that are kind of sensing into the fact that there's something bigger going on.
Mm-hmm.
And if no one's talking about it, people might feel alone in that, alone in that experience of just everything that is happening in synchronicities. Hi, Kim/mom. I see one live comment here. So, it's so important that we speak to this spiritual dimension that is coming in, because I've been having so many conversations with clients. I don't know about you, but so many conversations with clients about religious trauma and this concept of spiritual bypassing. And I've just been having personal conversations lately where religion is being used to hurt and to harm or to fearmonger. And it's like, it's becoming so much more obvious to those of us who are kind of attuning into this, like, something bigger is going on here.
Mm-hmm.
So what have you experienced with that?
I mean, I haven't had, I have clients that are working through religious trauma. A lot of them, they've just been working through it throughout. Like, that was like their presenting problem. But yeah, I mean, it's not, I've just been making my own realizations through conversations with different people. There's been feeling like there's major shifts in how people are in relationship with each other.
Mm-hmm.
Like, there's a lot more, like a lot more discussions between different, like a lot more transparency, a lot more realization that you have to put your foot down, a lot more
tough boundary talks,
realizing that we're done being complacent,
that we're tired of this elusive authority figure that pervades life from a fearful place. Like, that is in every single level of our society right now, from public school. Like, you fear the principal. You never want to be on the principal's bad side because they can ruin your whole life. Same thing with, wardens in jail. Like, that is the authority figure. You can be on their good side and have a good relationship with them and get special favors, or you can be on their bad side and a blind eye be turned to you.
I mean, that's how people parent. Like,
fear from parents, fear of religious figures such as God. Like, all of that fear keeps people from trusting that they can self-actualize.
Right. And fear is basically authority figures are lazy. That's or they're traumatized and
Well,
or both.
probably a little bit of both.
But the thing is like, in order to meet people like at an understanding place and have them learn consequences in an appropriate manner, you have to be creative, right? Like, fear is not a creative solution. Fear is just what people that's like, if it's not there. Like, I've heard parents guiltily say before, they're like, I was at my last straw and I yelled at my kid. And it's like, probably every parent or almost every parent has had that guilt come up, especially if they're trying to do the whole gentle parenting thing.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, well, yeah, all of us are working through our stuff. We're all imperfect beings, but your goal in the parenting model is not to like create your child's structure on how to live life based off of being afraid of different things. Instead, you are allowing your child to explore life and support them through the mistakes instead of threatening them.
To be empowered rather than disempowered.
Right.
And that disempowerment, like, oh, when I think of disempowerment, so many people that I have worked with immediately come to mind, and, past me comes to mind. I wrote about in a chapter that is going to be released in a multi-authored book called Soul Alchemy. I think we're launching in June. That's the current plan, but we're still feeling into the energy, and it's going to have this beautiful workbook. But anyway, in this chapter, I wrote about how I did not know how to be compassionate for myself until I had an authority figure, a therapist, because there's still a hierarchical relationship,
Mm-hmm.
show me what it was like to be compassionate towards herself, and then me finally be able to mirror that, because no one in my life had access to compassion for themselves.
Wow.
Like, when I think of my parental figures and even my grandparents and extended relatives, like, no one was demonstrating genuine compassion. No. Because no one knew what it was. They'd never had that shown to them. Mm-mm. Because of this authority-centric society.
Right.
And that, a lot of it comes from religious trauma.
Yeah. And I mean, that's a lot of how a lot of conformity happens. I'm thinking how different our families are, and I'm just thinking through how those different, like, disempowerment often, like, the compassion piece, like, there's a difference between being compassionately accountable for yourself and like beating yourself up through shame.
Mm-hmm.
And so we witnessed our parents either avoid due to shame, like avoid responsibility, deflect a lot, like place the blame on other people or on us. And so then, like, that would leave lack of accountability on them, but it was mostly because they weren't willing to look at their shadow where a lot of the shame was, and therefore that kept them in this spiral of disempowerment.
Yeah, and I think of the attachment triangle. I'm going to use my hands here for people that are watching the video. So at the top of the attachment triangle is the child. And the bottom right and left corners of the attachment triangle are the parental figures or guardians that the child is going to attach to. Doesn't matter the gender, doesn't really matter the configuration, but really the primary relationships that are raising them. It'd be interesting to look at in poly structures. Like, does it create an attachment pyramid?
Sacred
geometry. Children relational pyramids. Interesting. Anyway, so attachment triangle, child, parents on either corner, or guardians. So if one of them's missing, there's already foundation missing, right? You're going to have a lopsided structure because it takes two people biologically to bring a child into the world. That's just what it is. So that's how the biology there is working. The child might have other, attachment figures, but ultimately, again, those two caregivers or one caregiver or three caregivers are going to provide the structure that the child's going to see themselves in, the foundation on which the child's going to see themselves. So if the relationship between the caregivers, regardless of configuration, down here is rocky, the child's foundation is going to be rocky. And because of biology, we literally cannot, as children, understand why this isn't working. So we take it into ourselves as a child and we try to make sense of the environment and we try to control the foundation. Mm-hmm. We have no understanding of why this is happening or why we're doing what we're doing. It's just because of this structure of attachment. And any young being, whether animal, we're animals, any young being attaches to its caregiver. That is biological instinct to attach to the caregiver so you can survive until you are old enough to have the skills to survive on your own.
But we're not given the skills to survive on our own.
Bingo.
Which is why oftentimes when it's like, oh, you can go off on your own sort of thing, it's like you still have these child parts of you with wounded attachment pieces, and that basically puts you in this place of not being able to form healthy relationships with others,
right?
Or have a solid sense of self or self-trust.
Yeah. And so when for generations, all of the attachment triangles here are built on these rocky foundations, we're just building rocky relationship after rocky relationship. And we go on perpetuating this generation to generation to generation until someone says, I'm not just accepting this. There's something wrong with this. And I think that that's where there is this spiritual attunement piece happening, because so many of us are breaking free from organized religion, which is very one size fits all. You believe this or you're out. And I'm not speaking to one religion here. Like, this is perpetuated in so many spiritual communities too. And I'm using air quotes here because there are plenty of quote unquote spiritual communities that still spiritual bypass and still abuse their people.
Yeah.
And just brushed under the rug because it's the authority. The authority, we don't question them. They get to do what they want.
Yeah, it's organized anything. Like, if there is a hierarchical piece that is holding someone in power over you, whether it be through spiritual fear or spiritual whatever, or monetary security, like, that happens with jobs. And so it's like all of this stuff is, it's kind of like an inverted triangle. Like, this is the CEO, or this is the pastor, or this is the person in charge. And then here's the rest of the community just in this mind think or mind share, like, tank together, like sheep.
Yeah, like, these massive amount of people literally with one or two people standing on top of them. This absolute power dynamic when there is enough resources in the world for everyone to be fed, clothed, and sheltered and taken care of, and to have their medical needs met. And so many people who would gladly go to school to become doctors, to become, caregivers of all sorts, if we just provided for them to do it. People want to help. And we literally make it impossible in the society for people to help, because being helpful makes you poor. It makes you broke. It makes you not have access to your basic needs because you're trying to help others so much, and you don't have this good relationship because spiritual bypassing and all this trauma leads to codependency. Spoiler alert. I know I'm on big soapbox.
You're fine.
Yeah, and
I'm just nodding enthusiastically.
There's a comment here. I think it's best to question, read, educate yourself, and know what you believe and why. Absolutely. Like, everyone has their own belief structure and, unique relationship to source and spirit, whether that is God is the word that they use, or universe, a relationship with science.
Mhm.
That's fine too. The name that we call it, as long as we know why we're calling it that and we know why we're in relationship with that and that we're empowered in relationship with that.
Mhm.
Because I just, religion has become synonymous, unfortunately, at this point, with that disempowered model of spiritual bypassing and giving everything over to an authority figure, turning a blind eye, not owning their shit. Ownership is so important. Yeah, helping others brings joy. And that is true. If you ask people, do you want to help others? Like, would you like to be of aid to other people in a meaningful, joy-fueled way for you? People are going to say yes.
And so funny because a lot of those people I found, because I've asked this to a lot of my clients, but flip it around and say, would you be willing to ask for help or receive help if someone asked you that you needed help? Most people feel like they are not worthy.
They're not worthy. They're selfish. Asking for help is wrong because you're supposed to be. And this is part of internal family systems has a concept of something called legacy burdens, which are these legacies of trauma passed down generation to generation, and they tend to be specific to different cultures.
Mhm.
And American culture is racism, sexism, consumerism, aka capitalism, and individualism. And that all four of those are present no matter who you are, where, like, if you're here, you are touching these legacy burdens because they're everywhere. And we can bypass them and pretend they don't exist, or we can talk about them and heal them. We can heal all of these legacy burdens by accepting that they're not ours to carry and working towards letting them go, and saying that's not mine, and taking the action that proves to you that it's not yours.
So, what's the difference between taking something that of realizing something isn't yours to carry and bypassing it?
Yeah, so that's a good question. Okay. Bypassing is saying there's the shadow, I'm not looking at it, it doesn't exist, it doesn't impact me. Bye, right? Literally turning the blind eye is bypassing.
Like denial of it.
Denial of it, yeah. So working with it is essential in order to release it.
Mhm.
And this is usually in the form of, even in therapy work, like in IFS therapy or coaching, anybody that's trained in IFS, we essentially go in and we heal the burden. We are still doing healing work with it. We're acknowledging, oh, wow, look at the story that you've told because this has been installed in you for so long.
Mhm.
Like, I've been so honest with many of my clients because they needed to be able to talk about this. And I see the comment, a lot of people are afraid to ask. Yes, a lot of people are afraid to ask, and they're afraid to share truth. So I grew up in upstate New York and in an elementary school where there were no people of color.
Mhm.
And I think it was first grade, a African American or Black family moved into the neighborhood, and I immediately befriended the kid. I'd never met a person of color in my life, but I was like, cool, new person. And I'm a natural number 9, and we're by nature inclusive. And I'm again, like, we're getting into the messy part, but this was young, innocent child. I'd never experienced racism. My family didn't make racist comments as I was growing up. So I didn't hear these things until years later. I moved to Maryland.
Mhm.
And then it was all around me, and the comments were so there. And soon enough, I picked right up on them because it was so prevalent in society. The burden was right there. And I was like, oh, I guess this is mind carry too. And I still had plenty of friends who were people of color, but I would notice this very uncomfortable commentary that would come into my mind, just randomly.
Mm-hmm.
Like, black man walking down the street behind me, and I'm like, and then I'm like, it's just another human, right? But I would have that visceral response. If I deny that exists and I put it over there, I'm always going to have that response. And I'm never going to move past it. And I'm going to do a disservice to the people who I'm energetically not able to connect with because I have biases that are making me put up a wall with them. So I need to be able to look at that. Okay, I didn't have that legacy online when I was first born, but the disposition was still there. Like, racism is a generational trauma, and it's impacted anyone who has been in the United States and probably the whole world, honestly. But it's bad here because we have slavery still in the bloodlines, and we still have well, it's getting worse probably, but police violence is getting ingrained in us. So if we don't talk about that and we don't say, this brings this up in my body, right? Like, oh my gosh, I'm having this uncomfortable feeling when I notice that there's a black man walking behind me on the street.
There was literally I don't know if you heard the news story about a black high schooler who was looking for, like, he went to the wrong neighbor's house who was keeping his younger siblings at, and he rang the doorbell and he got shot by the older man who was living there. And
that's 100% on that older man, because again, if we're noticing these feelings coming up in us of judgment, of fear, of shame, of any big response, and there's not like violent action coming at us, it's very different to react in self-defense. But if my first reaction upon seeing a person of color is I've got to defend myself, that's on me to work through. And that's where bypassing just, that's the difference there. Bypassing does not allow us to heal and integrate a new concept, such as, oh, I don't have to be afraid when there is a black man walking on the street behind me, because there is no reason to be afraid unless he literally pulls a gun on me. Then I should be afraid. That's what I should be afraid of, is the gun, not the person. And so it's my responsibility to uncouple from those instantaneous reactions that society and culture and stuff brought on. And so that's the same with spiritual bypassing. I know I just went on a huge soapbox, but I think it's so important to understand how these legacies literally they're in there. And we have to be willing to pull them out and look, right? Yeah, we can purge and get so much support and validation in therapy. Yeah, and therapy is an essential component, I think. Even though I'm starting to move more in like the group healing and coaching direction, like the work that I have done in therapy with people changed their lives. And I'm proud to be able to say that. And I want everyone to find that aligned therapist that can help them work through their trauma, because we all have the trauma.
Yeah. Yep. And the bypassing itself is, bypassing is the denial of the shadow.
Right.
Like it's the, and I don't know if everyone avoids their shadow for, if you're going based off of Body of Nine,
shame, fear, and disappointment.
Yeah, like if someone is going to be disappointed in themselves if they look at their shadow, I go towards shame, so I feel ashamed of myself if I look at my shadow. I'm
afraid to look at my shadow because of what I'll find there.
Yeah.
And what people will think of me if they see it.
Exactly.
Yeah. So when we don't let ourselves work with our shadow, we do a disservice to ourselves. We do a disservice to everyone around us. There's so many ways to do shadow work. It doesn't always look like therapy. It can look like having open, honest conversations about things like racism or spiritual bypassing and stuff that people don't talk about. That's bringing the shadow into the light. Yeah. I'm not going to comment specifically on that because I will start soapboxing again. But yeah, the kind of group healing that I'm getting into, thank you for that question, is really communal healing. I've just gotten several books on, I just got We Heal Together, which is written by a Black American woman, and she has really done a lot of activism work and healing in community. The foreword's written by a Native person who experienced, an intense amount of trauma when there have been Indigenous killings that are still happening. There's so much trauma that's collectively happening, and it's important because, again, so many spiritual communities and churches don't have these kinds of conversations. They're just like either yay God or fear God. Like, it's kind of one or the other a lot of the times, or yay goddess, or I've got to get in line for the goddess. Like, it's very one or the other, and that doesn't paint this whole picture.
Mm-hmm.
And so we need communities that can come together to share in the light and share in the shadow, and have moments to just really get into themselves, but feel that presence of the community supporting the healing work at the same time. It's like this very powerful amplifier. And obviously there's some groups that are meant to be trauma groups where it's meant to be dredging that stuff up, but that's not so much where I want to go with, we're going to talk about the trauma specifically. Instead, we're more likely to individually select what shadow we're working on and allow that space of the container, almost like a cauldron, to help us get into the energy and see, right? Because the missing link is spirituality, because religious trauma is so pervasive right now.
Yeah, and I mean, I think the spirituality piece is missing because religious trauma has defined for it's the same concept of that we've been talking about recently, of the dominant culture defining for us the system. Like, it's just the system that we're stuck in. Like, capitalism is a system that we are, consumerism, productivity culture, all of those things we're stuck in. Same thing with organized religion, of like, oh, you want to explore your own spirituality? Well, this is the right and wrong way to do it. And that's how a lot of religions and spiritualities can turn into. It's like people will bounce from one different belief system to another because they'll keep finding themselves in groups that'll be like, yes, we ran away from this concept religiously, like this religious concept, because it was harmful. And yet our group is still telling you exactly how you must be in this spiritual situation, or else we can't consider you a member, sort of thing. And it's like, your rituals do a beautiful job of basically saying, here's the space, here's the intention that we're setting, but however you want to use this space, it's a big practice of learning to trust yourself again, and strengthen your intuition, because that's that I remember that being one of the first things I remember asking you about, like crystals, for example, and me being like, what does this crystal mean? What does this crystal mean? And you usually are like, well, like typically it's associated with this, this, and this. But if you pick up the crystal and have this kind of feeling, like gut reaction happen, then follow that. Like, just because it's written in the book everywhere that rose quartz equals love, and you pick up a rose quartz and feel courage or something, like,
I was thinking empowerment.
Yeah. Like, go with that.
Yeah,
Like,
go with what it means to you. Same thing with dream symbolism.
Yep.
Like Freud was all, this means this and this means that. And I really discovered in this last year in entering a empowerment based spiritual community that it's really about making your own dream symbolism dictionary, because the settings will mean specific things to you. The people will mean specific things to you. You know, if you have a fear of cats because you got scratched as a kid by a cat, and now every time a cat shows up in your dream, like that's a nightmare, and it means that you're struggling against something out of control in your life, like that's very different from, let's say, Justin, who would love to have dreams about cats because he loves every cat, even the dream cats. Like,
right. And
so if cats are supposed to represent only one thing by like Freudian psychology, like that doesn't match either. And that's another very authority figure, right? Freud.
Yeah, like, well, it's the same. It's just the concept of one size fits all is not conducive to community.
Mm-hmm.
Like, the one size fits all is pressuring everyone to fit in a certain way, or to, like,
you gotta conform.
Yeah, like, as soon as someone wants to be perceived differently, like as soon as someone wants to be seen as like their unique self, and are upset over the fact that the system of society has created these stereotypes, so they're going to be perceived in a certain, like, for example, take gender. Like, I present more masculine, but if people recognize that I have a chest, like I have breasts, like people are gonna use she, her pronouns. And so that's like usually what happens. But like,
and I look like a very, very straight woman, okay, except for maybe my glasses. Yes. My glasses are pretty queer.
They're pretty gay, yeah. But that's the thing too, is like people are like, but I want to it's like I want to fit into certain labels so that the rest of the world perceives me in a certain way. And it's just like, no one is going to, like, you have to feel in for yourself. Like, if you feel non-binary, whatever clothes you're wearing are non-binary clothes.
Right.
Like, it's not, I'm non-binary, someone called me she, her, I'm not wearing non-binary enough clothes. No. Like, we use way too much outside validation. Like, that's
that we're bypassing to the authority.
Well,
bypassing to the authority
because of the legacy attachment wounds that we have.
Exactly.
Like, full circle, we come back to, if we didn't have these attachment wounds, we wouldn't be constantly asking the rest of the outside world for validation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so it's this vicious cycle, and lucky me, I get to be the pioneer of change making and riding this wave of activism, and it's terrifying. I'm a natural number 9. Fear is my Achilles heel, and I know I've said it on a few talks lately, and I know my mom is watching live right now. Like, my mom has this huge fear that by speaking out, I've got a target on my back, and we've talked about it so many times. And if I let myself lean into my fear, I will stay there forever, because fear was visceral for me as young as 3, and it was fear of God, and I would cry in my bed at night because I was so afraid of God and what he was going to do to me, because I could tell I was different, even as a kid. So I was viscerally terrified, and if I stay stuck in my terror, which I can easily do even now, I won't speak, and I won't use my voice, and I will stay small, and I will stay, in my trauma. And like, I can't do that anymore and be empowered. And I want to show other people that they can be empowered, and that they can step into the authenticity and the truth of their voice, and that they don't have to pass their inner authority over to anyone other than themselves.
Yeah. I mean, you're basically doing exactly what happened to you in your past with your other therapist. Is you were able to witness your therapist be in a place of empowerment, and so now you have done the work to where you can be the model for others,
right?
And them be able to witness you in a place of empowerment, even when we're still human. And so you're still going to notice yourself being stuck in fear sometimes, but you won't be bypassing it. You'll be
feeling it,
feeling it, being accountable for it, asking for support around it.
Right. Being in community with it, having these conversations, establishing safety with other people, knowing who my supports are, which, yeah, like when we're part of spiritual communities, I've got to keep using air quotes and saying I'm using air quotes. When we have these quote unquote spiritual communities where when there is pain, when there is immense pain, when there's abuse happening, when there is, genuine harm happening, and we use our voice and we go to that spiritual figure, whoever we're trusting, and we say, here's all this pain, this person over here harmed me in this physical way, or, was threatening. Can you help me? And then the spiritual figure is just like, no, we don't talk about that here.
Oh yes, taboo
topics. Taboo topics are the topics that are not bypassing. They're literally the topics that help us be in relationship with one another and make sure that we're communicating well. So, it's always so important to be able to tune into our inner intuition and like set with what is right for us. And yet we've lost the ability to do that because of all of this wounding. Okay, we haven't lost the ability to do it. We've become cut off from our ability to do it. There's literally this wall of belief that has been installed.
I mean, the wall of belief, the more you're saying this, there's the spiritual bypassing, I feel, is related to the concept of faith, because a lot of times it's like, don't question this, just have faith. Don't discern this, just have faith. Or you aren't strong in your spiritual journey because you don't have enough faith in this X, Y, and Z. And sometimes the discernment piece, or oftentimes the discernment piece and the, trying to figure things out piece, is us having faith in ourselves. So as soon as a person of authority is like, nope, you questioning things not feeling right in your body is wrong because you aren't a good person of faith in this spiritual whatever.
And this comment, like or they'll say it's in the past, and if you've got God, you should be able to get over it. Like, that's a perfect example of spiritual bypassing. You've got God, don't worry. Well, you've got to feel that God has you, and you feel that in community support, not community bypassing. Or you feel that support when you're fully able to get into your highest self and drop in deep and have that connection with source, however you relate to it. But the way that happens for each person is so unique.
Yeah, and people are often like, how do I help a person in grief? Half the times as people are like, they're in a better place. That's problematic. And then the second thing people do is bring over a casserole. Like,
how about we talk about how hard it is?
Like, yeah, like sit in like the space with them. Like, it's not the fact that, and grief is considered a taboo topic. Grief is considered a taboo topic. Sex is considered a taboo topic. Just abuse is a taboo. Yeah, like all of these things are so just problematic to be taboo, because people are going to try and find community one way or another around these topics. And since no one has taught us to be in community in a healthy way, and we all have these attachment wounds, we're going to have really problematic, like half-baked communities.
Yep.
And so that's why we need to go into community building with the understanding that we have all of these wounds, and that we're going to be working through some of the shadow stuff and attachment wounds in order to like build the community with a really solid foundation, or else the solid foundation will not be there. And it's going to suck at some points in time of the community building. Like, it's because that's the truth.
Right.
Like, you can't just spiritual bypass your way and be an authentic community.
Yeah. And, you know, I've experienced it where people will give the air of, oh, you know, you can talk to me about anything. And then when we go to talk to them about anything, if they don't actually mean that, if that's a nicety, you know, a placation, which is very societal, right? How you doing today? Oh, I'm great, thanks. Right? Like, oh, you can talk to me about anything, anytime. But then, you know, they don't really follow up on that.
Yeah.
Like, we get so afraid to talk about what we're going through because we're met with a wall as soon as we actually start to share something in authenticity. And that's probably the wound that we need to heal first in order to move into more collective healing, is the ability to communicate about the need to communicate.
Yep.
And admit that we have a problem of running away from stuff that's uncomfortable.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because we're a species of pleasure seeking and discomfort avoidance. Like, as soon as someone hits discomfort level, like,
out,
we dissociate by going straight to our phones. We immediately, like, it's just, that's one big example, but it's just like the distraction piece. We distract ourselves immediately as soon as we feel uncomfortable. And it's one thing to do like the container method if there's something that's so uncomfortable, or there's like the way that your day is scheduled. Like, if we have a client 5 minutes and I feel distressed, I need to put
me crying, literally sobbing between my clients last week, and then I'm just like, okay,
reel it in.
Yep.
But then you don't.
But then I'm going to come back to this at the end of the day. It's that intention to come back to it. And that's why container is still different than spiritual bypassing, because it is saying, I'm going to put this aside for when I can really look at it, when I can really deal with it. I always tell my clients, when you're doing container, ask yourself the question first, is there anything I can do about this right now?
Yep.
And if the answer is no, container. If the answer is yes, actually assess if that's true. Yes, I could do, and list the action plan and then go do it.
Yep.
Or realize that now you really can't do anything about it right now and container it for later. But yeah, like, that's not bypassing. Bypassing is putting it in the container, putting an anchor on the container, and throwing it in the ocean and hoping it sinks to the bottom where you will never see it again.
Yeah, it's kind of like whenever a friend or a person will, like, and of course, like, speaking to my neurodivergent friends who this is not intentional by any means, but like, but like, if you've ever experienced on the other side of it where you've been like, hey, do you have time to talk about blah blah blah, and someone's like, sure, not right now, but we'll talk about it later, and then like months will go by and like it won't come up again, and then you'll be like, oh, I have to bring it up again, and then they never seem to be ready to like talk about it. And that can feel, that's like, the things that you're putting in the container are parts of you, right? And that are wanting to have a voice. So if you keep them waiting, or you attempt to throw them away, they're just going to get real bitter.
Yeah. And being able to touch base with ourselves consistently is super important.
Yeah.
So on that note, because I came here to talk and drink lemonade, and I'm all out of lemonade, so it's time to wrap up and get more lemonade.
Wow.
I will be hosting a solar eclipse call tonight. So if you are catching this live or on 420, that is at 6 p.m. Eastern time. There is a link to grab your ticket right here in the podcast description, but it's also on my feeds. So
Yep.
If you would like to join us for that, I'd love to have you. But regardless, I just want to put this out there that I am in the process of really building a genuine spiritual community called the Sacred Moon Circle that is able to touch base a couple times a month, drop into some energy work, some self-actualization, some intention setting, some releasing and integration, like these things that we don't put in our schedules.
Right.
And so that's kind of it's an accountability thing, but it's also coming together in community, because when we can feel, oh, we're all here right now sharing in this deep spiritual moment, and we're understanding that there's this bigger picture, whatever that bigger picture looks like to us, it like creates this genuine excitement and heals us so much more rapidly than if we're trying to do it on our own.
Yeah.
So,
and I want to point out that whatever belief system you have, or lack of belief system, like, this is also just gaining the concept of trusting yourself in these moments of healing.
mm-hmm.
And so it's like whatever part of your spiritual path you're on, whether you are someone who is like very Christian, or you study Buddhism, or you're pagan, or any of these things, or someone you consider more agnostic and kind of just believe in the power of nature. And
I'm a druid personally.
Yeah. So anything that you consider like sometimes you just want accountability over healing. And it's like the beautiful thing about Safriana is that all of these practices are welcome. She places the space for that. It's just a place where you can explore your faith in yourself about a lot of these like spiritual messages. And, if you find yourself being in a space where authority figures have told you the right way to pray, or the correct way to show up in blah, blah, blah space, or whatever, like, this is a place where you can unlearn some of those things and really sit in your intuition and explore your faith from a more open lens.
Or, just your spiritual body.
Your spiritual body, yeah.
Your spiritual body, because the spiritual body has to kind of click into alignment with the physical, mental, and emotional for you to know exactly what steps to take next in your life, for you to touch base with what messages are coming through to you, the synchronicities, the signs from God, or the, omens of peace, or like literally however it shows up for you. If you don't have, and you have not made the time to be in relationship with that, you are probably stumbling your way through life, just kind of like bumping up against things. You're trying this over here and you're trying this over there, and you're like, why is nothing working? Well, because you have not clicked that spiritual higher perspective, right? Like this hawk or eagle soaring overhead, able to see the entire landscape, because there's a bigger than 2D point of view, right? The bird is flying up and down and through the sky in all dimensions. That's kind of what the spirituality is like. It's getting us that bigger, broader perspective. And when we pull it all together and we come within, we get such intense clarity on where we're at, why we're there, what we're doing next, and all of that. So I would love to invite people to join us in this community, because we're going to be meeting 3 times a month. Tonight's our first call. So if you want to sign up for the membership and just jump in tonight with us, like, would love to have you. But please not after 5 p.m. EST, or we will not be able to get you links in time. But then we have a Manifest Your Month call. That is time to be with me in community and get coaching on like the next steps you're taking if you want it, as well as to just sit down with your planner or your scheduler and kind of figure out what you want to manifest in that next month. And we do a little bit of affirmation and energy work and go on our merry ways. That's the last Sunday of the month at 4 p.m. Eastern. And then the new moon and full moon calls happen around the new moons and full moons, but either on a Monday or Thursday at 6 p.m. Eastern. So that is what's coming together. I'm so excited to be like finally officially launching it and having all the back end done. So
Yeah, it's going to be super awesome.
yeah. Please don't bypass, my friends. Be with your feelings and know that you are worthy of having the full expression of yourself, the full feeling of yourself, the full embodiment of yourself. Like that is, we're here to live this physical, tangible life with its joys and its sorrows. So yeah. Heck. What a 420 podcast.
Indeed. Soapboxes.
Soapboxes. Bye for now, my friends.
Bye.